everyone, welcome to my live inner circle painting session. So I just finished a design session. This is a separate video, and now we're going to get ready and down to the painting. So we're painting April showers today. I really wanted to create something that is, fun for spring. I have some flower paintings planned, but it's very easy for me to paint flowers all month long because I love painting flowers. But I really wanted to also get a mushroom into my gallery. So I thought, what a perfect combination of rain and mushrooms. And then I thought I'd also just throw a little gnome in there just because, what's a mushroom without a gnome, right? So I'm gonna do a little mushroom with a little gnome underneath it, and it's raining. And I'm gonna use some fun colors today to keep it really simple. I wanna keep almost like a monochromatic background, so meaning one color with black and white, and then little pops of color, but nothing crazy colorful. I want this to look, while gnomes are very fun and obviously very juvenile and whimsical, but we can still make our painting something that is more pleasing to the eye. So I'm going to mute some of those colors down a little bit, and I'm going to turn my camera around in a minute, and I'm going to show you my sketch that I did earlier. And I also have a little shading on there because I like to also play around with like the lights and darks of a painting and start planning that in the beginning. So you'll see some shading in there. So let's stop chit-chatting, and I'm going to be teaching this, since I'm teaching this live in the inner circle, I'm also going to pull up the inner circle on my iPad, which is nearby. And if this, there we go. My tripod will behave. I'm going to get this up nice and high so you can see my whole canvas. And before I do that, here is our little sketch for today of our little gnome under a mushroom. Now, I like to keep my paintings, looking beautiful, of course, always, but also something that is easy to paint and with just a few simple steps for each element. So we're going to have the elements we're going to be working on today are basically going to be the sky with the rain, the mushroom, the little bit of background that we're going to have, or foreground rather, with the grass and the little stem, and then our gnome, which the way I'm going to simplify the gnome is I basically don't want any legs. I just like his little feet kind of poking out from his beard. And the little arm back here just kind of suggests that he's leaning back. I might just tilt him back a tiny bit more, like just lean him back so that he looks a little bit more like he's sort of leaning back a little bit. So I might just make a little adjustment when I do the actual painting part. Okay, so this is our plan. And the colors I'm going to use today, I'm going to show you on my iPad some of the colors that I screenshotted. So I don't want to go too crazy bright, like, these bright greens and things in the background, because I don't really want a big green painting on my wall either. I want to have some more muted greens, like I want it to look like it's green, but I'm going to play around with kind of toning it down so it's a little bit more of a neutral. Not that neutral, not that yellow. So I went over more of these in my design session, but I'm just going to show you some of my other favorites to get an idea of color. I love the colors that are used in here, the way, again, it's kind of muted and toned down a little bit. I also, of course, love our little classic gnome that everybody loves. And this is where I might kind of pay homage to this little guy and have a color in his coat, which might just be his arm. And I might have little brown shoes. And we do have the red on the mushroom, but I still think I might want to give him a red hat. And then just looking at the rain on the mushrooms, so there's lots of different references that have rain coming down. This one doesn't, but of course I just needed a reference for the mushroom and this unique feature to the stem, which I'm going to be putting into our mushroom. We need to have that and these little white bumps, which I love. And then as far as rain, here we go. Nope, that's not rain. That's not rain. What to do with my rainy mushrooms? Oh, here. So we might have some streaks, so we can create that rain with some streaks. We can also create it with little dots, like little dashes, so shorter little streams of rain. It's just how much movement do we want to catch? Because if you have a picture and you slow down the shutter speed, basically the raindrops will create a streak. So we can kind of paint that easily by painting lines. Maybe little bounces off of the mushroom would be kind of fun. And or we can do smaller little streaks of rain. So there's different ways to illustrate rain. Here's another good example. A lot of photography is going to have streaks, which I think is kind of fun. We might need to do that. Oh, neat. Here's the mushroom with no rain, and there's the mushroom with rain. It's kind of cool. And then this was one more where the rain's coming straight down, and again, kind of bouncing off the mushroom a little bit. So we can put some raindrops. We can put whatever we want in here. It's going to be fun. Okay, so that's enough of that. Let's get into our painting. And we're going to start off with a brown underpainting, but let me first go over the colors. So since I'm painting this for the very first time, the colors might change, but they'll be in the color sheet that you already have if you're watching this video. Let me just bring up my inner circle page. Hold on a second. Let me grab I gotta reach across to get my iPad up here. Because I need to watch the video because my camera is above my head, so I want to be able to say hello to people who are painting with me live or watching today. The video isn't playing. Okay, see, that's the problem. Let's see what we have here. Hi, Jackie. So is it playing now? Are you guys seeing the video? Hi, April. Welcome to the Inner Circle, April. I also have a special treat for myself today because it is fun painting morning. I don't usually have coffee and donuts, but I'm more of a tea drinker myself. But I decided to have coffee this morning because I found a gluten-free donut in my freezer that I had forgotten I had. So I'm actually having a very rare treat of coffee and a donut. So I'm using burnt umber as my underpainting. And in a very simple way, I'm just going to put the underpainting on here, establishing a little bit of a light source right from the beginning. And I'm going to use a paper towel to put my underpainting on because it's just faster. It's faster for me. It's faster when you have a group. If you're teaching this. So here's my wet paper towel. And I'm going to take just a little bit of brown just to show you. So you see how you can do it really light or very dark. I'm going to have it be very, very light up here where I'm going to have my sky. So let me just get in a little bit of light here. Sometimes it helps to have a little extra water on your paper towel when you're painting a very light underpainting. You want more water. So I'm still going to do brown, but maybe we'll just even also give it a little direction, like our rain's coming down this way. Now it's not a ray of light, so it doesn't have to have one source. Like a ray of light, you're going to have one source, but with rain, you might just have it coming straight down. Okay, so now for the rest of the painting, we can go just our regular underpainting. Just fill it in brown. You don't have to worry about, we're not necessarily creating a painting here, but we're just laying in our main areas, and this is also very useful to kind of get your painting planned out. You can get your big areas sort of laid out. You can get your big areas sort of laid out, and maybe I'll just sort of put in my mushroom. I want to make sure I have a spot for my gnome, so I'm going to just give my gnome a basic little blob here. And my mushroom. Do you see how we can just put in the major shapes? This is a great way to do that. You don't have to do it for every painting, but sometimes it helps, and you can always make adjustments very easy. Just brown over it. So I just kind of wanted to get my basic shapes in here, but otherwise it's just dark brown in the bottom, this bottom L here, and then we're going to be adding in more beautiful layers of dark. But we kind of established some of our composition as well, so I think we're off to a good start.
Are you on?
I am.
Because April said she can't hear or see anything.
Well, Jackie said that she did. Is April still saying she can't?
Yeah, well, and I didn't see anything yet either. Did you just go on now?
No, I've been on for a few minutes, but I see my video on. Did you go on your computer and see if you can see me?
Yeah, let me check.
Okay. We have some people who are not able to see the video, so we're not sure if it's on their end or our end. But I can see my video, and Jackie's commenting, so that helps. Yep, good, Jackie. Thanks for the feedback. So while this brown underpaint is drying, and while Raphael, oh, I just dropped my pencil. Oh, I just had a breakage of a really nice pencil. Oh well, it's kind of like glass. So for our brushes today, I'm going to use a large flat brush. It's actually called a bright, even though it's kind of square and flat, but it's called a bright. This is a number 16 bright. I'm going to use a number 6 round. So that's just I'm going to call that my pointy brush. And then for smaller areas, I might be using a smaller flat brush. This is a number 10 bright. And it's getting a little fluffy. I wonder if I have a newer one. Hold on. So fluffy. Okay, I have one that's a little bit newer. I might use that one. I think I need to update my brushes. I'm going to plug in a speaker, and hopefully this will also add to the video. I should have plugged this in earlier, so I apologize. There we go. All right, so my brown is getting dry. I think I might hit it with my blow dryer and get us to that next step. Okay, there we go. So now it's dry, and now I'm going to lay on the image with a chalk drawing. So you are going to have a outline for this that you can transfer onto the canvas by chalking the back of your printout and then just drawing it on. Or you can also cut out the outline if that helps you to cut out the main shapes and then trace them, trace the edges with a pencil or a piece of chalk. Okay, so my sketch, I'll show you that one more time. So here's my little rough sketch, and we're going to draw this cute little guy out, and we're going to take our time. So if you're watching this live and painting with me, you can pause the video here, you can watch it and then get your drawing on there, but take time to get that drawing really nice. And I might have to also turn my canvas like this occasionally, because when you paint on when you draw on a flat surface, it can be distorted. So you always want to make sure that you are checking it or drawing with something square to your vision. I'm going to do my best to draw it out, and then I will check it to make sure that it's not distorted from me doing it flat. So I'm going to have my my mushroom. And give it a little curve, a little more angle there. Okay. And now my little gnome. So also my mushroom, I imagine my mushroom, so look at my drawing. Do you see how I drew the mushroom off of the rectangle? Because I want to make sure my mushroom makes sense and the stem is in line with the center of the mushroom. So I talked about that a little bit in the design. Well, I didn't talk about it in this design phase, but I talk about that often. So my stem's going to be here. So I want to make sure I have that stem just making sense with my mushroom. There's the little skirt, and there's the little mushroom. Doesn't matter what's back here. Okay, now for our little gnome. So the gnome he's going to be kind of leaning back. So he's leaning back on his hand. And his little feet are poking out of his beard. So I kind of want to create this motion here, like he's kind of leaning back underneath the mushroom. And I'm going to have let's just get his little nose in here. I don't want to have him too close to the bottom here, so I might need to erase him completely and start over again, or I'll just keep working on making adjustments so that he's the right distance and the right proportion. So here's his little feet. I kind of like giving gnomes a little foot that looks a little bit like a Seven Dwarf. So Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, he's kind of a little bit of a foot like that. So there's his little hat. Is he leaning back? Let's get his little arm back here and his little hand. And now I'm going to pick it up and look at it and see if I like how it looks. So give me a sec. I need to hold it straight and looking at it. Does it look the same as my little drawing? Let me make some little adjustments and I'll bring it right back. Okay, I think I need to make an adjustment to how I placed his feet, because his feet are going to kind of indicate the angle that he's at, and I don't want his feet to be up around his ears, so let's get his feet down a little bit further. So I'm going to bring his feet down along this line here. This is the angle that I see him at. So he's going to be kind of like this. He's kind of a 3/4 view. So I'm going to have one little foot here and one little foot here. Okay. The canvas is a little damp, so it is not letting me chalk in there. Okay, so I think that's more of what I'm looking for. Let me just get rid of some of this excess chalk so I can see my little gnome. You want a little, I love the little, I love the little fluff to the tip of his beard and maybe the tip of his little mustache here. Okay, so I can make any additional adjustments while I'm painting him. If I, as I'm painting him in, I might do some little tweaks to him, but I think it looks pretty cute. Okay, so let's get some paints on our palette. I already have the burnt umber. I'm going to need black and white. There's my white. My black is running low. There we go. That's good. And we need some green. I'm going to use green oxide, which is my Art Rave green, go-to green. And we're gonna be using red for our mushroom. So I'm gonna be using some bright red. Stuck. But I'm just gonna put a little bit on there because I don't want to accidentally hit it when I'm mixing my colors, but just so we can see. Now, in order to make the greens a little bit lighter, I might be using a little bit of yellow. And I also might be using a little light yellow when I highlight my red. Now, as far as any blues, I do like to put blues in the shadows of things because it does kind of help to cool those colors down. I don't know if it's necessarily essential to this, and I do like to limit my colors. Oh, yes, I do need blue because I'm going to do just a little bit of blue on his arm. So yeah, I'm going to use a little bit of blue. So I'm going to put a little cobalt blue on my palette. All right, so there's our colors. They're pretty primary, but we're going to take these bright colors and we're going to make them more muted. So I'm going to start off with the sky. I'm going to use my large brush, and I want to create a rainy, bright, sunshiny April rain sky. So I'm going to use a little bit of the green in the sky and a little bit of brown. I know it seems like a strange sky color, but he is in the forest. So I'm calling it a sky, but it's actually not a sky. It's the forest that's really far, far in the distance, and it's the light of the shower coming through. So I'm choosing not to do a sky, but I am showing the forest in a brighter light. So I can use a little bit of water just to thin it down a tiny bit. Let's get a good amount of white. And since I want this kind of warm rain, I'm going to use a little tiny bit of yellow in there, just a small amount. So green, brown, white, and a little bit of yellow. This is going to be our, what's going to be a sky color, or our, we're going to call it a sky because it looks like a sky, but it's actually a distant forest. And just start brushing it down. You can see how it's still very green, right in the middle, which is fine, because I'm going to add more white. Especially around our so the white is going to help to lighten up that green, so add lots of white. And 1 second. And we're going to get a little bit of brown and green towards the upper corner, because I do want it to have like a little bit of darkness kind of in the corner. And use a good amount of water to blend those colors. We already have the brown underpainting, so we do already have a little tone, but we want to get that little streaks of green and brown kind of coming from the top. Remember, this is distant forest, so it's okay if it's a little brown-green. It's not sky. I know if I say the word sky, you're thinking, Michelle, why aren't you using blue, or some blue at least? Nope. So a little bit of brown and green near the mushroom is also going to give us a little contrast. And let's just finish filling out this whole bottom section. One second. Where did you go? Okay. So I want to keep this line nice and straight because I want to have my rain coming down, right? So whatever angle you do, try and keep it straight. It's a little tricky. Okay, so now right along here, I'm going to start getting white along here, just along the bottom here. I want there to be white in the middle and along a little along the bottom, but I am going to get a little darker down here. So that we're going to change from white to a little bit of a transition. So get some white in there because the white is our sunshine coming through. So you definitely want to have some good whites here in the middle. And we can always add more whites later. Whites are fun to add later too. Let me get my little drawing out. I hid it underneath here. But one thing I want to do for around the base here is I do want to get a little bit darker because I want to have a little bit of a contrast between our gnome. So I'm going to get some brown and green, and I'm going to go right underneath, right along my gnome, with some green and brown. Maybe a tiny bit of black. And I'm going to just add this little tiny bit of shadow in here and then just blend it with the wet white. So this has to be done a little quickly because we want to use the paint while it's wet. So when you get that white in there, immediately go into your darker color and add a little darkness, just the green and brown along the bottom edge. And then start blending it by brushing it back and forth into your white. You can always add a little more white. And this can be brushy, this can be messy, as long as it's a little bit blurry because it is distant forest. And that's all you need to worry about, is just creating a little bit of contrast in there. It's a little bit of darkness just to kind of give that appearance of some shadow back there. Now continuing with the background, I'm going to go with some darks down below my gnome, starting off with black in the corner. And as I work towards the front, I'm going to start getting in some more green, maybe a little bit of blue. You can always add green to your blue to give your green a little bit more rich, deep color. So I'm going to add just a little bit of blue to my green. And as I come towards the gnome, I'm going to start getting a little bit more green. But I'm also going to be mixing brown with my green because I like muted greens. So if you like bright greens, then don't mix brown. If you want it to be muted like mine, then add a little brown. Don't be afraid of adding brown. So we're just sort of doing some of the foundation base coats. This is the base coat for the hill that he's sitting on. So I'm getting some more brown, blue, and green for the bottom of my grassy hill here. And you can see I'm just pulling this brown and green mixture right from here. And I'm going to start getting in some little grasses. Just start using your brush. Now I'm holding it vertical and I'm just giving it a couple little tufts, because this is just the fastest way to start creating grass is putting it into your base coat. Just start getting your base coat in with a little bit of grass. Little grassy strokes. Now the base coat is what is our foundation, and then we'll add highlights and shadows, but you know, since this is going to be grass, you might as well just add some little texture. Just put some little brush strokes in there to create some grassy texture. Now I'm leaving the area around the gnome. Once the gnome's painted, we can put some grass in front of the gnome, but right now we're just going to be laying in the base coat. So we're just laying in these nice dark base coats. Now for behind the gnome, I'm going to establish a really nice dark area by going with blue and black, maybe a little bit of green. I want to get really dark in through here. And I might move my gnome back just a little bit. So painting that little spot right there, nice and dark. And you can also add just a little bit extra dark right underneath here. Just little, and we'll stop it there. So there's our base coat for our rain, our hill, and then our little bit of background here. All right, I'm going to wipe off my large brush, give it a rinse, and we're going to base coat in the mushroom and the stem now. So for the stem's going to be in the shadows of the mushroom, but I do want to have just a tiny bit of light on here. So for the darker base, we're going to use just a little bit of brown and white. This is burnt umber. And I'm just going to paint in the stem. Burnt umber and with some white. I'm not going to worry too much about the bottom, so I'm going to have grass covering it. But I'm just using a little bit of white with my large brush. If you take the white on the corner of your brush like that, you can put the corner along the bottom here and then just make a little jaggedy raggedy edge. And add a little highlight. And that stem is already done. That's all we need there. Okay, so the stem that is all we need for the stem because it's already in the shadows and it already has a brown underpainting. So don't make it more complicated than it is. It just needs that little highlight to show that fun little ruffle. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my brush, and the next thing we're going to do is the mushroom base coat. Okay, so for the mushroom base coat, this is where I'm going to have, of course, the brightest color, which is red, but I'm still not going to be using the red straight as it is. I'm going to mix a little bit of brown in it. So I'm going to take some brown, put some red, and I'm going to have the darkest area up in this corner here. So let's get some brown and red. Now as we come down the mushroom to the edge, we're going to have a little highlight along this top edge and maybe along this edge because it is raining, so it is going to be wet. But let's go brown and red at the very back corner. Now as we start coming forward, I'm going to still leave the brown and the red there, but I'm going to start adding a little bit of yellow. I'm going to paint this next area brown, yellow, and red. And you use a good amount of paint here because it's a big area, so you want to always use a little bit more paint so then you have more to rub around. So I'm still taking some yellow. I'm getting a little bit more yellow as I get towards the edge of my red here. So I'm going to get more yellow because essentially when you have a red object, when it gets lighter, it gets orange. So we want to have a little orange. And I can start taking a tiny bit of white here and putting some white into my orange. So this edge here, I'm going to move it out further. This is going to have some white and yellow along the edge here where it's going to be catching the light of the rain, the sun coming through. See how it's getting nice and orange in here? You could take some more white, add more white to the edge. And you can make any shape to your mushroom that you want. You can make it more domed. You could make it like sort of fanning out. You can make it whatever shape you want. But I would just suggest having this dark, this is bright red and burnt umber. And then as you get closer to the edge of the mushroom, you want to start pulling yellow into your red-brown mixture and white. Because this is what's going to give you that highlight, that beautiful orangey edge that we want to have. Now you can make it brushy and streaky. You can streak it up into your mushroom if you want. Kind of giving that suggestion of that contour of the mushroom. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. This was the base coat, and I also did some shadows and highlights, kind of all in the same step. But I might come back and add some additional highlights. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then maybe take a look at it. As it dries, sometimes it darkens, sometimes it needs a little touch-up, but I think that this might be all we need to do on that one. Okay, so now let's work on our gnome because once we do our top layer of grasses, that's going to go in front of the gnome. So let's work on the gnome. While I'm still using the large brush, I'm just going to put in his beard because we do want to have this large area sort of filled in. And I'm going to keep it, again, with our warm theme here. I want to mute it down, so even though his beard is whitish gray, we are going to also have brown in it. So I'm going to use brown and white. He's going to be kind of having a gray tan beard. So I'm going to go gray along the side where there's the shadow is going to have a little bit of black on it. So black and brown on this side of the beard. Notice that I'm turning the brush with the direction of his beard, the hair, the way the hair is growing. You always want to keep your brush strokes in line with the growth of the hair. So now as I move towards the front, I'm going to put a little shadow in here. So as I move towards the front, so first you just lay on the left side of the mustache, the left side of the beard, and then the little left side of the other mustache. We're just going to put a tiny bits of brown gray. Now while it's still wet, I'm going to leave that brush, the same paint on my brush, just go straight into white and just start adding white, filling in. Filling in the beard. So this is still technically the base coat, but you can see how we already have these lights and darks. We're establishing that light source. And I'm going to put a little streak of white on that mustache, and I'm going to put some streak of white on this mustache. Always keeping, now my brush, I'm holding it up and down so that I'm using a skinnier stroke with this large brush and curving it as I paint the hair. I'm turning it with the hair. Now if it's easier for you to use a round brush for that, if you're not so good at turning your brush like this, you can use a round brush and you can also add some streaks. But I like doing the large brush first and just getting the big areas down, and then using the pointy brush to add the details. So I'm doing the large brush just to get the base coat down, just to get those broad strokes. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse off that large brush. And since we're getting into couple of the smaller details, I'm going to switch to the smaller flat brush. This is the number 10. I'm going to take a little coffee break too. So one of the things, oh, good, Jackie likes the colors. So far we've only used green and red. Now the brown and black we mixed in, of course, and a little bit of blue. And we mix in a little bit of yellow in here. But primarily what we're creating here is warm green using a little yellow, cool green using a little blue, but we're keeping it mostly green. And also, I've never used the straight green, not yet. We're going to probably get that in some of the highlights, but by using the bright colors in smaller amounts, we don't make it look so cartoonish. Okay, so now I need to make a decision on color. If I do the red hat with the blue jacket, then it's going to be red up against red. That's our classic gnome. He always has kind of a red, our little, you know, our typical garden gnome has a red hat with like the blue jacket. And I like that. So anyone who's watching live, what are your thoughts about having, should I do a dark blue teal hat and a red jacket? Or should I go with the very classic traditional gnome and have the red against the red, and then have, which of course I'm going to have a shadow in here. I mean, we're going to have contrast between the reds, but do I do a teal jacket and a red hat? And I'll show you the little reference of the gnome. Where is he? Here. Whoa. So here's our classic little gnome, right? This red hat, kind of blue jacket. This is what I'm thinking that we would go with because this is so cute. I mean, the colors are so cute. But we will have his red hat against the red mushroom if we do that. So just a thought. anyone have if anyone has a suggestion for the color? Let's see, we have Shireen is suggesting a green hat. I like that idea. Well, I kind of want to go with a little bit of blue-green, Shireen, just because I do want to have that little bit of blue-green, but you can do green on your hat. You can do solid green, you know, like straight green. I do like the idea of having like the greens and browns again, and maybe just a little pop of red for his jacket. Should we do that? I'm going to see if we have one or two more people that want to comment on color selection. Should we do red hat, teal jacket? I think I'm going to go brown on the shoes. So I definitely want to have something brown. Or do we do a blue-green hat and a little red jacket? Okay, so April, we have 2 votes for a non-red hat. All right, thank you so much. I love it. So I love painting live. I get all this fun advice. Okay, so let's do a blue. I'm going to do a blue-green hat, but I'm going to use lots of brown because I want it to be nice and earthy looking. So blue, green, and brown. I'm going to do the back of the hat here. And just fill it in. I think the shoulder has to come in front here, actually. Yes, no, let me think. No, actually the shoulder will go behind. Never mind. I had to think about that for a second. So I'm putting a little bit of blue towards the front. And then green, brown, and blue. It's just a combination. Wherever it shows up for you is fine. Don't worry about it being in the perfect spot. You can even make any color hat you want. You can make it more blue, you can make it more brown, I mean more green, whatever. Whatever you like. I want just a little hint of blue. So there's my base coat. And you know what? While it's still wet, I'm just going to go right into my shadows and highlights. So for the shadow, I'm going to do some black. And I want to do some black underneath, right underneath the mushroom, because he is under the shadow of the mushroom. And I'm going to do a little bit of a shadow along the back of his hat, but not all the way to the edge, just almost to the edge. If it gets too black, just wipe off the excess on your paper towel and then just blend a little bit. And then I'm just going to do a tiny bit of black also along this back edge here, because this is also kind of hidden under the mushroom, and just a little underneath the bottom of his hat here. Okay, so that's all the black that I want. So rinse off your brush. It's pretty dark. I'm not going to be afraid of darks on this painting. I'm going to be pretty brave with the darks, and because we're going to have fun with highlights. So I'm going to take a little bit of white and a little bit of my blue-green, and I'm going to put some little highlights. This is where the color can be very small area, but just the suggestion of a highlight here is going to show us the color of his hat. So I'm going to put a little bit of streak of white. Along the front of his hat. And I'm taking just a tiny bit of white and just putting a little bit of white along that top edge. See that little edge right there against our dark sky? Just need a little bit there. And there's our little highlight. So it's a very subtle touch of blue-green, and I think it looks mostly green, Shireen. I know you asked for a green hat, so there you go. Okay, so now let's do his little brown feet and then his little red jacket. So for the brown, I'm going to go with the burnt umber and white. Now this little foot is behind his beard, so it's kind of hidden. You don't see the heel, just the top of the foot. And I'm going to do the other foot is kind of, here's his little heel. And there's a little toe. It's going to go behind the beard, but we can always paint the beard over it. I just want to... Let me think. Do I want the beard in front or behind? I think I'm going to go with it behind. Let's just paint his foot here. Okay, so there's his little foot, his little toe. And after we do the base coat, we're going to wipe off the excess paint, and we're going to do a little bit of shadow. Get a little bit of black on your brush, do a shadow on the side of the left side. And we're going to do shadow underneath his beard because he is going to be it's going to be a little bit underneath his beard, but also on this left side. Okay, then wipe off your brush. The highlights for the brown are going to be very subtle, so just get a clean brush, make sure there's no water on it. And take just a little bit of white and brown and just do a little highlight. It's not quite. So just that tiny bit of white on his toe. And I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of white and brown on this side of his foot. His foot's kind of a blob, so don't worry about if it has like any type of foot shape. It's really just, looks kind of like a potato. And everyone's going to know it's his shoe. So don't panic if it doesn't look like the perfect shape. Just lights and darks. That's the important part, is you get lights and darks. Okay, so now let's paint in his little arm. Now I want to pick up the reds, the beautiful dark reds that I made on the mushroom. So I'm going to get red and brown. Now I can change the shape of it if I want to. I don't need to follow in the lines where my chalk was. You can always do the same thing too. I'm going to just paint the little coat. And then I'm going to look to see if I need to make it thicker or thinner. Let me take this down for a second. I need to look at it straight on. And take a step back from it once in a while. Okay, I'm glad I did that because I actually can see a better arm right here. And I'm going to paint his hand here. And then paint black over this area. Oops, that's blue. So see how I kind of changed the positioning of his arm a little bit? I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll reassess it and see if I need to change it a little bit more even. Of course I got blue there. Whoop. So I'll decide, now his hand is not staying that color. I just want to kind of get a feel for it. Okay, so I'm going to leave his little arm there for a minute. And we need to kind of fill in these little extra spaces in here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black and maybe some blue-green. Just take and just go right underneath here. Let's just get those areas filled in if they're not filled in already. So we need to have some black shadows because our gnome is in the shadow of the mushroom. So he is going to be kind of have some good shadows going here. And then just sort of brush them out. Get some black along the bottom here, and then just give them a little messy brushing out. I'm going to get some little blacks in the nooks and crannies in here. I'm going to put a little black under his hand. No. And I'm just going to put a little bit of black in this little corner, this little miscellaneous corner here. So using my corner of my brush, I'm just going to get a little black corner in there. And I'm going to take a little bit of black along the top of his sleeve, because it is kind of behind everything else. So I'm just going to put a little bit of black in there. Okay, so we're getting our base coat in for all of the gnome. There's lots of details that come in the top layers, so don't worry if yours looks a little messy right now, because I know that I feel the same way. Now I'm going to do the hand and the nose, so let's get a, I need some more yellow. So this is going to be a peachy tan nose, so you can make it as peachy or as tan as you prefer. I'm going to try and get a little bit of a red and brown mix with some white, and then just a little bit of yellow to warm it up a little bit. And so you'd be surprised how quickly that gets too pink. So just be careful depending on, and I like to use a little bit more brown so he looks like he's got a little tan, a little suntan. And we're going to put in his little nose. Again, this is just the base coat. And I'm going to put in his little hand down here, which is just going to be a very little bump. And now while it's wet, let's just get our pointy brush, and I'm going to switch to the pointy brush so that I can just do just a couple little swooshes of highlights and shadows. So for the shadow, I'm going to get a tiny bit more red and a tiny bit more brown and go right underneath the bottom left and the left. And we can go a little on top of his hand here. Then wipe off or rinse off the shadow color. And then we're just going to do a little bit of highlight with straight white. And I'm doing it quickly while it's wet, because then I can just get to put a little white on his nose. And if the paint is still wet, I can just give it a little scrub. Just a very light little scrub into the nose and kind of blend it in a little bit. And on his hand, you don't need much highlight because it's in the shadow, but we can just put a tiny bit on the top if you need to. Alright, so that's all we need for his nose. We got the base coat, shadow, and highlight. And the steps that we do now, so these are all like the initial steps, and now we're going to come through and we're going to start adding that top layer of highlights and shadows and getting all of our fun details in. Okay, I'm just thinking about my steps. This thinking step can be edited out later, but I'm going to pull up my chair and get comfortable, and let's start thinking about our final steps for the painting. So I left this part brown or light brown because I'm going to be doing a completely different green here. I want this to be really bright, like it's catching the sunlight, and we want to play up this whole fun, beautiful sunlight. So that's why I had this little dark edge, this dark blurry edge, because I want that sunlit grass to really pop. Now it can be grass or it can be moss, it can be anything that you want to make it, as long as we give it a light source, as long as we give it a little bit of a highlight. So I'm going to use my large brush, and I think I might just do this now because we do have enough of the gnome painted. And then whatever we can do, go in front of the gnome, and whatever's showing are the parts of the gnome that then we'll finish with some extra highlights. So let's get our, I'm trying to decide if I want, which brush I want to use. I think I'm going to go with my large brush because I think I can go with large grass. Okay, small brush will give small grass. But since our gnome is actually a small creature and it's a mushroom, grass is actually going to be proportionally larger. So the grass here can be large. So I'm going to use green, and now I'm going to use yellow and white in my green. So yellow, white. I want to get a really nice bright green mixture here. Now I'm going to be using the bright green as well as the straight green to put in my grass and highlights. But let's start with the bright green, and I'm going to just put it along here, mixing in some straight green. I'm going to just fill in the grass with this bright green mixture. I'm using the straight green, but I'm also taking a little bit of this yellowy green because I'm creating a little bit of a transition. You see how I'm kind of overlapping? When you go into this very dark area, you can take a little bit of straight green and just go right over the dark area with the straight green, making some grasses in there. So I'm staggering. The grass can be it can be up and down, it can be jaggedy. The grass is your own creation. You have to just be free with the grass. Don't make it in a straight line. Try and zigzag it a little bit to give it a little more natural pattern and interest. Okay, so let's just fill in this little area here with our green. The green's very transparent, so this is going to need another coat. But we can start adding some highlights to this area of the grass. So let's go with the white again, and a little bit of yellow next to our green. And I'm going to put some little bright grasses, just catching the light back here. I'm going to put some grasses around his foot, around his beard. He can be in the grass. The grass can be kind of coming up around him a little bit. Now back here we don't want to get as bright as along here. So if it starts getting too bright, your grass gets too bright in here, wipe off your brush, go back to green and maybe even a little bit of blue. Because in the shadows you have darker grass. You still have grass, you can still create a highlight, but they're darker highlights. It's just going to be more straight green. Maybe a little bit of blue. See how we're creating this cute little grassy mound. I picture it kind of like grassy moss, like moss and grass. I mean, you can go either way. So let's just do our little second coat on here now, because it's still very transparent. So let's get some white, yellow, and green. Make a very, very light limey green. And I'm going to tap along this edge here, making, I was talking moss, now I want to paint moss. So I'm going to make some moss in here. So yellow green, then just do some straight green. You can do some blue-green in the shadow. Don't be afraid to add blue and black if you want to add some shadow to your green. That's where you get control over your colors, is when you start realizing that if you want it to go into a shadow, you just mix a little bit of blue and black. When you want to go into a lighter green, you just mix yellow and white. So I'm going to put some moss here. Now, you know, moss and grass often grow intertwined, so it's okay if you kind of transition from grass to moss. You don't have to make one decision. I'm going to have both, because it's not either or. You know, you got to change your motto to both and. Right? That's the fun part. You get to make it your own. Okay, let me just get my brushes out of the water. I don't like to leave my brushes soaking in the water. It's really not good for them. So if you do that, you might want to start switching up. Clean off your brush and then lay it down. Okay, so let's get a little second coat of highlighted grass here. So the white is going to give it a nice opaque brightness. Yellow is transparent. The blackout white is very opaque. That's going to give us these really bright highlights just with one stroke. So if you're not using blackout white, you might need to do 2 strokes, 2 layers of white. But the blackout white is very opaque, so that will give us some instant brightness with just 1 stroke. So I'm going to add some individual little strokes of really bright white highlights on the grass right here. Going into the moss, where I can just add grass or just tap it and make it moss. I also want to add just some little leaves, because, you know, in the forest, it's not just perfect grass. Let's put a little leaf, some little leaves, like I'm going to put on his little shoe there. I'm going to put it's a little water droplet. I'm going to take some straight green, and I'm going to make some little leaves over here. just because it looks like it's more natural that way. Let's put some little grass at the base of the mushroom. We didn't have anything around the base of the mushroom. We need some dark grass back there. So I'm going to use just blue and green and make some darker grass because this is in the shadows. Filling around his little hand. And then we can just add a couple little leaves back here. When you have this beautiful darkness, everything stands out against it. So you can just put a couple little green leaves. I'm going to add on these leaves, now they're in the shadow, but I'm going to add just a little streak of highlight just to the edge. Just a little bit of white and yellow, a little bit of my light green. Just give it a little pop to the edge. Maybe make a little stem or two. I don't know what that was. Let's put a little stem along here. So just put a couple little stems and flowers in there. I mean stems and leaves. You can make them any way you want. I just think it breaks it up and just so it's not just like plain old, you know, grass to dark. All right, so let's get our mushroom dots on. I need a little bit more white. So we're going to add some little mushroom dots. Oh, you know what, actually, I think I'm going to do that later on only because let's first do the base coat for our little mushroom dots. I'm going to do them in tan. So I'm going to mix some white and just a little bit of brown. And I'm going to make these little, some of them are going to go over, they're kind of bumpy, they're three-dimensional, so they're going to go off of the mushroom as well as on the mushroom. So I'm just going to roll my brush into little blobs so they're not too perfect. There's going to be more near the top. Let's get some more white. So this is the base coat for our little mushroom dots. I am going to mix a little bit of brown in them because I don't want them to be straight white. You want to reserve the white, straight white, for absolute highlights. So just put these little blobs on here. They are going to vary in how far away they are. Sometimes they have they're like close together. Other times they're a little further apart, and there's less by the edge of the mushroom. There's more towards the top middle. Okay, so I think I'm going to just add a few more. Whoops. Now there's going to be more on this area because as the mushroom moves away from you, it starts to pile up, right? The perspective on them starts to gather. So there's going to be a few more along this edge as the mushroom turns away from us. Okay, so now we're going to work on the finishing up our little gnome. I want to keep this as simple as possible, and you can always add more detail if you have more time. But I want to keep time a consideration, but I also want to make them look super cute. So we have our light rain coming in here. At the end of the painting session, we're going to do all the whites. We're going to have the white rain, we're going to do the white highlights on our mushroom, we're going to do the extra highlights on our gnome where we need it. But let's just do a couple little shadows and highlights to finish off our gnome. So we did all the base coats. Some of the base coats we started adding shadows in there, and I know on here we did do shadows and highlights on our hat, But I'm going to do a little bit of a second coat of some of this just to give it a little bit more richness to the coloring. So let's get a little teal. I'm going to make a little second coat, teal, blue-green with a little bit of brown, and give my hat a little bit more color. So again, you know how I told you it dries dark? So if it dries dark, just add in some more color. I'm going to get some brown in there. Okay, I'm going to add a second coat to the rim of his hat. Now a reflected light or a reverse shadow is sometimes done on the darker edge so that we can make the back of the hat stand out against the distant background. We're going to put just a little bit of a dark blue-green highlight along the back edge. Not as light as this highlight, but just a little tiny highlight so that the light looks like the light's kind of coming through a little bit. I'm going to fill in any little nooks and crannies with black. So I have some nooks and crannies over here that need to get filled in. I'm going to just fill them in with a little bit of black. And underneath this mushroom here, there's a little brown edge. I want to address that edge and make a decision. We need to make that probably a dark red. So I'm going to use brown and red. And just come along here and just fill in that brown line. If it's not filled in already, you might already have yours already cleaned up, but I don't. Okay. Might as well put a little extra red down there on this little coat. All right, so now we did the second coat to his. I got some more nooks and crannies I got to fill in. Okay. All right, so now let's work on his beard. So does his nose need a second coat? I think his nose looks pretty cute, but I do think he needs a little bit more highlight on just the top of his nose. White sometimes dries a little bit not as bright, so I'm going to add a little bit extra white on his nose. And now I'm going to go into his beard and start adding the white to his beard. So we purposely did the beard kind of gray so that we could add the white highlights with abandon. And I want to have nice bright highlights on the outside of his beard. Now I'm just using the tip of the brush to create these wispy outside highlighted hairs. And this is where I like to go outside the lines and just let it go, let that beard go crazy. Just get some swooshes in there. Now towards the back of his beard, we want to keep that shadow that we had before. So we can go with a little bit of a highlight, but it's going to be a darker highlight. So I'm going to get a little bit of a gray brown, and I'm going to highlight the beard a little bit in the back. Save your straight white for the front of the beard. You highlight the darker areas, just like with the grass. We highlight darker areas with dark green. We highlight light areas with light green. The beard, in the shadows, the highlights are going to be a darker highlight. So keep that in mind when you're highlighting the beard. You want to keep all the bright whites only on this side. So with the beard, I'm starting kind of in this middle area, and I go down, making him wispy going down. And then I start in the middle area and I make them wispy going up towards the nose. So you see how I'm creating these little points. So your starting point should be this middle area. This way you can go up and make it pointy towards his nose by pulling up your brush as you go up, make it pointy. And you can go down just using a very light touch. Just swoosh that brush in the direction of the hair and build up as many layers as you want to create more hairs. It all depends on how many layers you want to go. And you might need extra pops of white along the top edge where the light is shining down on our little gnome. And remember, it is wet outside, so when things are wet, they might have a little pop of white on them, like his little nose, the little shoe. So I'm going to pop little highlights. You see those little highlights of white? I'm also going to put a little shiny highlight on my mushroom. So I'm going to get water and white, and I'm going to put some white highlights. I know this looks crazy. We're going to put white highlights right in here. Watery highlights. We can mix a little bit of orange and yellow and get a little orange in there if you want. But we want to get it nice and bright in here so that it looks like the sun is reflecting on our mushroom. Just scribble and scrub it. It doesn't have to be blended. It can be brushy, so you can have an edge there, it doesn't matter because we are creating a shine. So I'm using my medium brush now just to create a little extra white highlight on my mushroom. And we want to create a little shine on our edge here. So I'm taking straight white, adding a little extra highlight to the edge of our mushroom. You can pull some streaks up if you want, make it look really cute. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my my pointy brush that I was just using for my beard. We got all these nice white highlights. We did the little white highlights, the little pops of white on our hat and our shoes. And now we're going to take this little white and we're going to make little pops of highlight on the top edge of our little bumps. So remember they were tan? We made these kind of a light tan. Well, now we're adding the white highlights on top of them to give them their highlight. I'm just going to highlight the white ones over here, not those ones. Leave those tan. Just highlight these white ones on the edge. And now let's get our rain. So we did our white tips. Now let's get our thin, I'm going to get water and white with my pointy brush. And we're going to make our rain here. So get your brush nice and chiseled. And we're going to go very, very light on the tips, on the tip of our brush, and just try and get them all parallel if you can. Just various lengths. They can have various lengths. Some can be brighter than others. It's okay if some are bright white and some are watery white. Just get a thin watery white mix. And see, when we get over this darker area here, this is where it gets kind of cool, because when you'll see more of the rain on the darker areas. Whatever your brush length is, it doesn't matter if it's short or long, because if you saw in the beginning, depending on the shutter speed of a camera, that really determines how long the streak is. So if you have a shorter streak, if you want to have short dashes, then your rain is short dashes. If you have really long ones, then you have you have a slower shutter speed, basically. So either way, they both will look like rain. So I'm just going to try and get them straight as possible and as parallel as possible, right? Because the rain can go in different directions, but we don't necessarily want it to look crazy, too crazy. We can bring it down over our shadow area. I guess we don't want the gnome to be rained down. That's why it's underneath here. Now, if you want to add some little raindrops to our rain streaks, rather, to our like rain is bouncing off of our little mushroom, we can just add some little streaks going in a couple different directions. And just have some watery, just a couple little watery little arcs, having the rain coming down on our mushroom. And I'm going to actually put some little raindrops coming like this. Just like some fun little so you can have a couple little extra dots where the water is kind of popping off, right? So add a couple little extra white dots to your raindrops, like it's bouncing off your mushroom. I'm going to add a couple little highlights to here, just to add a couple little streaks to my mushroom. And the final touches to this painting, I think, are just going to come in the forms of any additional highlights you might want to add, or shadows. So he's missing some shadows around his beard. So I'm going to take some little tiny bit of gray and some water on my pointy brush. And now this is something you've got to be careful with, because you don't want to make your whole beard gray again. But I'm just going to go around his nose and pull that watery gray into his beard. So you just want, this is just a very subtle little glaze. I'm going to go a little bit of black, a little bit of gray in these little nooks and crannies. And then with just a tiny bit of water or white, you can pull them down into the beard. So see how I added all that gray around his nose? So I want to create those little deep shadows that are going to be because of his nose. So just use a little bit of black and water. And then you can come back and add a little bit of white on top. If it gets too dark, just take your white and go back from the middle and just make your couple little white hairs coming over the edges. And I think I'm going to give him a little bit of more of a light brown highlight on this shoe. And then for his little arm back here, it's very, very subtle, but I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of a yellow and orange highlight, just a little bit, just to kind of create a little highlight on his arm. Maybe there's some backlight sneaking around over here. Okay, and I think we're done. We've created the rain. I'm going to take a look at this. I might come back and add some extra touch-ups. I'm also looking at the picture on the screen to see from far away. But I wanted to keep it really easy so that the beard is probably going to be where you're going to spend the most of your time, because this is our subject. This is our focal point. So if you're going to get detailed, spend some extra time on the beard. And I think I might just add a little bit more highlights to my grass in here because I just love this light green. So I'm going to get some green and white and yellow and just play around with maybe some extra little highlights a little further back. So maybe some little grasses, some leaves. And you can never get too much white and yellow little highlights on these bright greens, because this is going to be a significant pop of color. But it doesn't have to be in a big area. It can be a small area. Just make it pretty. Make it that beautiful green and the moss. I like maybe I'll put another little leaf here. So I love these little guys, these little Okay, we are finished. I might have to add some more rain later on. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to look at it and then maybe add, if I come in and add any little bonus section at the end, I'll let you know. I'll come back live. But I just want to show you, for those of you that are watching this video really quickly, how to paint the edges. So you're just going to take a large brush with your black and you're just going to go side to side. So you're just going side to side will give you a nice clean edge in the front. And I always do this right when I finish my painting because then my paint is wet, my brushes are already dirty, and so I don't need something to come back to do later. Let's just do it now, and then our painting has a nice finished edge so that if we don't frame it right away, we can still, or ever, we can just enjoy it with a nice dark edge. It cleans up the border as well, but you only want to go side to side. You don't want to try and paint a straight edge, but if you just go side to side, you don't have to paint a straight edge. You just drag it across and it'll be straight all by itself. And then I paint the back area back here. You want to get that really well covered, and the corners. But this front edge, make sure your brush is flat. So I think I need to make the rain fatter, someone's saying. Yeah, I think I might. I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to come back and make the rain a little bit more white, because white paint fades sometimes when it dries. It looks brighter, especially when you mix it with water. It looks really white, and then it kind of fades when it dries. So we might need to add in some more white rain, because this is really about the rain. So we got to make sure that that is really well noticed. Let me finish this one edge, and then I'm going to do some more rain. Okay, so I'll do the other edges later. And I love his teal hat. Oh my gosh, it's my favorite. All right, so I'm going to wipe this off. I think I might actually use my large brush, because the large brush is very chiseled, and I think I can make a straighter line. So let me get some straight white. Oh yeah, this works really well. You know why? Because it's also making the first hit is coming down a little fatter, and then it's tapering off as it goes up. So this is a great rain technique. Use a large brush and then just go in that direction. You might need to move your canvas so that you get the right angle. In fact, I'm keeping it straight because of the video, but what you should do, and this is very important, is you want to move your canvas in the direction of your arm going straight across. Figure out what is the easiest straight line for you to make, then turn your canvas to meet that spot, that direction. See, because otherwise you get that little curve like I just did. Okay, so I think he looks really super cute. So we got the rain looking a little bit more white, and we fattened up the raindrops on the tip by using this large brush. A chiseled large brush going sideways, you can add a little fatness to the tip of your raindrops, and then give it a streak to give it a tail. And maybe we'll add a few more little heavier so that they show up a little bit more. We'll make some heavier little dollops here. Okay, so there's our little rain coming off of. It's hard not to make, I don't want to make too many and have it look like it's disorganized, but we do need to have a couple more raindrops, I think. And let's just add a couple more on here because it is coming down all over the mushroom, so let's just add a few little. And maybe a few more little drops, little splashes. There we go. So there's our rain on the mushroom. Now I'm going to do a little extra shadow here. I'm going to take a little bit of brown and black, just a tiny bit of brown and black, and just make a little maybe a little extra red. Just make a little shadow in here. Okay, it's going to have just a tiny bit of, just a little bit more three-dimensional effect to our little bumps here. Okay, alrighty, I think we're done. Alright, so there's our little gnome, and I'm just going to finish doing the sides with my brush. I love the additional raindrops. Those are definitely okay. Let's see, I'm just looking at some of the comments. Okay, so Raphael's giving me some suggestions. Thanks, babe. And I'm just going to use up the rest of my paint, my black. I can even mix a little blue or green into my black and paint the sides. Get those edges painted. Okay, one more edge. I think we've got enough paint to go around here. Now don't forget to let your painting dry completely. Varnish it to protect it, and the varnish will also make the colors more vibrant. It makes the blacks blacker. It will kind of give a little extra pop to your reds. So the varnish is a beautiful final touch. And wash your brushes with brush soap. So I don't always mention that, but when you have your brushes and you walk away from it because you're so excited about your painting, your brushes will be ruined if they are not cleaned properly, and you get all that paint out with a good brush soap. Like the Masters brush cleaner is the one I like because it really gets the paint out. But brushes are going to be one of your better investments when you start painting on a regular basis, and you want to keep those brushes really like new and lasting you a long time and performing for you for a long time. So All right, so there's all of our edges. I'm gonna go wash my brushes, and I will turn it around, give you one last look at it. Ta-da! All right, have a great rest of your day, Inner Circle members, and thanks for watching. And I can't wait to see your paintings. If you're painting this from a video, please share it in our Facebook group, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.